guys in the dark.
On my first day of high school, they held the orientation in the large auditorium prior to splitting us up into our homeroom classes. It was the first day that I'd ever had to get myself to school on my own. Up to that point, we'd been bussed in and out. High school the year that we had to tackle public transit. And of course, I got turned around once I got off the main street, and I was really late. Like really, really late. I was a bit breathless when I had arrived, but I went right through the front doors, headed to the auditorium. There were at least some signs telling me where I should go. But when I got there, the halls were empty and quiet. And did I mention empty? I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out what to do. I was late. But I wasn't so late that they shouldn't have been in the auditorium. But maybe they weren't. I headed back to the main office to ask what to do. They told me to go to the auditorium. I said that I did. There was no one there. They said that's because they're all inside. So I went back there. I tried quietly to open up one of the very large doors. But not only was the large metal door handle not quiet, the door was locked as well. I put my ear to the door. I could hear someone speaking. So I went to the other side, and to try to open up the other set of doors. As I put my hand on the handle, someone had opened the first door, stuck their head out, didn't see me on the other side, and then they go right back in. As I rush over and grab the handle, the door locks once again. By this point, I was looking to see if I was on candid camera, because if not, I was surely secretly auditioning for either Mr. Bean or Benny Hill. I briefly considered what the consequences would be if I just went home. Nope, that's not an option. The consequence would surely be a painful death. I came to think this would have been the better option, but hindsight is always 20/20. So, having no choice, I knocked lightly on the door. There was no answer. So, sucking in my breath, I knocked a little bit louder. Still there was nothing. I brought both my hands up the third time, and intended to go all Dustin Hoffman on the doors. But just as I was about to make contact, the door had flown open, and I flew forward. Not very gracefully, mind you. From my place on the ground, the room was pretty silent, considering that it was full of class of 93. I pulled myself up. I caught the eye of the principal, who was standing on the stage with his mouth wide open, and as though he'd been caught mid-sentence. He lifted his eyebrow, pulled his head to the side, indicating that I should just take a seat. As I followed the directions of his gaze, I realized that everyone in the auditorium had turned around and was now staring, silently, right at me. I dusted off my hands and my pants, turned to the poor guy who had just come to open up the door, nodded slightly, slunk over to a seat at the very back of the auditorium. That was just my first day. You can only imagine how much I enjoyed the rest of my high school experience. I was in my literature class last week. Nothing special there. We were talking about some research paper that we had to write when my teacher asks if I wouldn't mind running an errand for her. Something about booking the computer lab to do some research, I think. Of course, just like any other bored student, I jumped at that opportunity to leave the class. So I grabbed my friend, and I left. Now, my lit class is on the 3rd floor. The computer lab is in the next building. So to get there, we would have to take the stairs. I hate the stairs. They are a creation from hell, sent here to try and kill all of us. Literally. I try to avoid taking them whenever possible. If I get caught on the elevator without a pass, it would be definitely worth it. At least I wouldn't have to take the stairs. So, it being in the middle of class, there was no one around. I figured why not take the elevator now? So we decided to do that. Taking the elevator down was not the problem. There was no one around. It was pretty great. However, we were taking the elevator back up. I really didn't want to go back to class. So we went to the 7th floor, pushed all of the buttons, which was fun because buttons are the greatest, so that we would just stop on every single floor so we could waste time. We got 2 floors down before our teacher had got on. She had stood in one of the corners, looking at some paperwork. We continued, stopping on each floor. No one was getting on, and no one was getting off. I would have thought for sure that she would have caught on and got mad, but she didn't say a single word. Finally, we had gotten back to the 3rd floor, walked off the elevator in silence, thanking God that we didn't get caught doing what we were doing. My sophomore year, one of my childhood friends died in a car accident after he had fallen asleep at the wheel. He smashed his car into the limestone wall bordering the entrance of our small town cemetery. He is buried in that same cemetery. His parents were sent a bill for the repairs. Everyone was really pissed off about that and chipped in to help them out. During my junior year, 3 of my friends from the class under me piled into a car one night. They went to go drinking in the middle of a field, where an old missile silo was. It was a pretty popular hangout for teens from the local area. The farmer who had owned the land was tired of kids constantly hopping the barbed wire fence, so he went to go chase them off, driving like a bit of a psycho. His wife had called the cops a few times, but it's hard to get anyone out to such a remote farm in short notice. That's all that happened before any officers managed to arrive. They all piled into the car and peeled off. But being idiotic, wasted teenagers, decided to go back and taunt this guy. They went back, parked in his driveway, and started yelling at his house. He stepped out with his hunting weapon. They turned around and started hightailing it out of there. He decided to fire a few warning shots. That was his words, into the back of the car as they were speeding away. 2 of them ended up with some pretty serious, if not life-threatening, lacerations. One of them, though, took 3 rounds, 1 in the back and 1 on the side of the face, which had blew apart his lower jaw, and 1 in the back of the head. That dude went to prison for murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. I attended my second funeral for a friend in high school. There were really only like 70 kids in my graduation class that year. Back in the early 1980s, my brother's high school principal arranged for an English teacher to murder another English teacher and her children. The teacher was murdered. The kids were never found, though. The principal had went to prison, but was released because of misconduct by the prosecutor and police. But he died shortly after that. The murderer who had killed the teacher died in prison. It's unclear why it really happened. There are rumors of a love triangle and insurance payouts. There was also a rumor of the kids being burned in the school's incinerators, which were quite large. It became a book and a movie called Echoes in the Darkness. The same school also produced a murderer who had assaulted and killed a mom and her infant daughter. I knew this kid really well, and I was not surprised that this had happened. 1 year ago, on Black Friday, my wife and I attended my 10-year high school reunion in Milwaukee. We made the trip up from Chicago in anticipation of a great night, and it did not disappoint. My wife did not attend my high school, but she grew up not too far from me. We've been together since our sophomore year of high school. Prior to the actual reunion, we had met up with about a dozen friends for dinner and drinks. After we headed to the reunion at about 8 p.m., Now, just let me preface the rest of the story that my wife has given birth 6 months before, breastfed, and therefore have not drank in a year and a half. So the night commences with the usual awkward chit-chat, reminiscing and drinking. At about 10 p.m., I asked a buddy if he had seen my wife. He had no idea where she was. I asked around a bit. Cannot find her anywhere. Finally, I head over to the bathrooms. I ask a girl that just came out if she can go back in and yell for my wife. Sure enough, she comes back out to say that she's in there and she's not doing very well. So I wait for the bathroom to clear. I go in to go find my wife passed out in her own puke on the floor of the bathroom. I hurriedly go to the coat check, grab her coat, pick her up off the bathroom floor, puke and all, and I head out to hail a cab. Luckily, the cab comes rather quickly, and we escape. We head back to our nice hotel, which I had got in anticipation of our first night alone in a while. Let's just say that it was all for naught, as the rest of the night consisted of me cleaning her up and then passing out on the bed. But my night didn't end there. Earlier, I had told a buddy of mine we were staying at this particular hotel. At about 3 a.m., I was woken by a voice saying my name. As I wake, I find a security guard in my room, with my buddy drunkenly smirking behind him, asking if he is with me. I tell him yes. The security guard leaves us. I throw a pillow on the floor and say have at it. I pass back out, only to be awoken again at 4:30 a.m. by my buddy kneeling in the corner pissing on the carpet. I yell at him, And amazingly, he stops midstream, walks to the bathroom, finishes, and proceeds to come back and sleep in his own piss. I awake the next morning to a room reeking of piss and puke, and with no adult play to speak of. Moral of the story is, don't let your buddies feed your recently pregnant wife drinks, and don't tell them what hotel you happen to be staying at.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.